Thank you. All right, I'd like to call this Special Rules Committee meeting to order. Let's go ahead and start with a roll call, please.
Felix Rivera.
Present.
John Weddleton. Jamie Allard.
Here.
Christopher Constant.
Here.
Forrest Dunbar.
Here.
Crystal Kennedy.
Ms. Kennedy is excused.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Here.
Cameron Perez Verdilla. Pete Peterson.
Present.
Meg Zalatel.
Here.
You have a quorum. Do you want me to
Great,
share
thanks,
the
Barbara.
agenda, Mr. Chair?
Sure, yeah, if you could, that'd be great. And then eventually the senator will be also presenting, so we'll have to take that down. Okay, so we have two agenda items, but before we get started with the two items, I wanted to mention one thing that I forgot to include in the Assembly Chair's reports in the last regular Rules Committee meeting. So starting next Friday, May 14th, and going forward, our Friday work sessions and other meetings will all be in person at the Assembly Chambers with the same opportunity to participate over the phone, which you have at our regular Assembly meeting. So we are at a point now where I think we can start doing that, and looking forward to seeing everyone in person on Fridays and every other Tuesday. All right. As usual, if members want to get in the queue, please put yourself in the chat or text me if you can't access the chat, and I'll put you in there. Also, as usual, for special or regular Rules Committee meetings, feel free to be informal. That is okay. And then one last thing, if we have time to get to it, I am going to be adding a item C on the agenda, which is a brainstorm on Alaska Black Caucus community conversation topics. We have a conversation coming up. As members know, it's every other month. So May, end of the month, is going to be our next conversation. And I wanted to see if members had some specific topics that they wanted to discuss with the Alaska Black Caucus and members of the community who attend. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So first topic on our agenda is a presentation on prior Assembly Legislative Services Office. Want to note for the record that we've been joined by John Weddleton and Cameron Perez Verdilla. Thanks for joining. Okay, so over the last couple of years, as we've looked at strengthening the legislative branch, the old Legislative Services Office was brought up from time to time. Unfortunately, no current staff have knowledge of this office, sort of what did they do, how many staff worked in the office, why was it cut. Thankfully, several careers ago, now Senator Sen Gray Jackson worked in this office. A big thanks to the senator for taking time to present before the Assembly about the old Legislative Services Office as we continue to look at strengthening the legislative branch of the Municipality of Anchorage. So I'll turn it over to you, Senator, for the presentation.
Thank you, Chair Rivera. First, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity. I'm truly honored to be able to give you folks a little bit of history of that office. And I also want to take a moment to thank you for your service. I want to recognize my staff, Bessie Odom, who was gracious enough and did an excellent job of taking my notes and putting together a PowerPoint presentation, which is what I'm going to be using this afternoon. Thank you, Bessie. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. As you all know, I served on Anchorage Assembly for 9 years. As the former director of the Assembly Budget Office, I quickly saw that dissolving that office was a disservice because of the work provided to Assembly members that no longer existed. I spent more time than I should have working on issues that the former staff could have assisted me with when I was on the Assembly. The office was repealed, which I always believe would result in a disservice to the Assembly. Although the clerk's office did the best they could and a wonderful job with the added responsibility, it remained a burden on that office due to other specific code-related duties and responsibilities that they had. Former Assemblymember Dick Train and I have advocated for the return of this office for several years during our service. And right now, it really pleases me to see that the body is interested in considering the reestablishment of the Assembly Budget Office. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to go through a timeline here. In 1983, John Wood was elected to the Anchorage Assembly, and he served until 1993, when the election was moved from October to April. In the mid-'80s, Assemblymember John Wood wanted the Assembly to have an independent analysis of the administration's budgets, and that's when he hired Joe Griffith on contract to serve in this capacity. In 1987, Assemblymember John Wood was elected chair, and during that time, he advocated for an Assembly Budget Office. In 1988, the Assembly Budget Office was established, and Joe Griffith was hired as the director. Tom Whitkin was hired as the utility budget analyst, and I was hired as the administrative assistant. In 1990, Joe resigned, and Gene Rupert, former AWW general manager under Mayor Knowles, was hired as the director of the office. After Gene served for several years, Clay McDowell was hired as the director. Next slide. In 1993, Assemblymember Dick Cheney was elected to chair, and he removed Mr. McDowell, promoted me as budget analyst, and hired Greg Moyer as the director. In 1988, Anchorage Ordinance 9072S was approved, which changed the name of the office from Assembly Policy and Budget Office to Assembly Office. It amended the code regarding Assembly-appointed classifications and added a section regarding merit increases for Assembly executives. In 2001, Greg Moyer was hired as the municipal clerk, and I was promoted to director. In 2005, Anna Fairclough, formerly Anna Fairclough, now Anna McKinnon, became the chair, and Dan Coffey, the vice chair. An ordinance in 2005, they also approved an ordinance that repealed Chapter 2.80, which established the Assembly Budget Office, and replaced it with a revision to the code in Section 220.055 Municipal Clerk's Office, putting all the duties of the Assembly Budget Office and responsibilities within the clerk's office. Next slide. The responsibilities of that office, which was and had been for nearly 18 years, analyze municipal budgets for comparison with previous budgets for completeness, accuracy, and adequacy, prepare findings and conclusions regarding the budget for Assembly members, including revenue sources and expenditure levels, analyze the budgets to include examination of fund sources and estimated operation and maintenance costs of facilities, analyze utility budgets to include review of rate of return, debt service, and future capital needs, prepare working papers to support all proposed changes to the code, conduct research and prepare issue papers, report and make recommendations to Assembly members on financial, program, policy, and budgetary issues, or as assigned by Assembly members. Attend Assembly work sessions, Budget Advisory Commission meetings, task force, subcommittee, and ad hoc committee meetings as necessary. Review and conduct research on quarterly financial or budgetary statements and analyses of proposed modifications in relation to the originally adopted budget. Affirm that budget programs are fully funded in the manner and degree intended by the Assembly when funds were appropriated. Review weekly Assembly agenda items to determine the accuracy of funding sources and compliance with the code and policy procedures. Administer the contract for the annual municipal independent financial audit. Prepare ordinances, resolutions, memorandums assigned by the Assembly members. But note, at that time, the Assembly did not have its own attorney. And that's a whole nother story because it took years of advocacy and it being vetoed by Mayor Meister in that position for the Assembly to finally get their own attorney. Assist Assembly members with constituent inquiries. Coordinate Assembly members' requests with constituent inquiries. Administer contracts as executed by the Assembly chair on behalf of the Assembly, and coordinated Assembly member travel. And basically that office was in place to serve the needs of all 11 Assembly members, whatever that might be. So I can add a clause in there, a statement in there that says other duties as assigned. So that's the history and the responsibilities of that office. Again, I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions that any of you may have. And by the way, we're going to forward the presentation to the clerk's office for distribution. And I know there are a couple of typos, and we'll fix those before we send them to the clerk.
Great. Thank you so much, Senator.
You're welcome.
Are there any questions on the presentation? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Oh, thanks. Hi, Ellie. Nice to hear from you.
Hey.
There are a couple of questions. When you were in that position, so you've got 11 assembly members as your boss. I mean, how did you prioritize what got done?
It was, for me, I'm really good at prioritizing, and it was basically a first come, first serve situation. But if an assembly member had a priority over another person's request, I would let that assembly member know and then take it from there.
So was that like we're thinking of hiring someone to do some of this stuff, and I just want to make, you could get conflicting things. You get demands from assembly members. I need this now. It's always we do our work at the last minute, some of us. Was that a big issue, or is that just something rare?
Not for me, it wasn't. And so I suggest when you hire somebody, they have to have skills that allow them to be able to prioritize and work for 11 different assembly members with 11 different ideas and needs.
Yeah, okay. And I've got another broader one, but Felix,
Yeah, go ahead, John. You can ask one more question.
Oh, okay. I look at that list that we put up on the screen, and some of that, I think Desiree does some of that now. And then, of course, Dean and, his staff will do some of that. So is that correct?
In terms of ordinances, absolutely. But that
who does like scheduling travel and stuff?
Well, right now,
Right
as
now.
I mentioned in my presentation, all of the responsibilities of that office were given to the clerk's office. And I always advocated that should not have happened because the clerk's office has very specific duties. One of them is running elections, dealing with boards and commissions, dealing with liquor licenses. They have very specific duties that are not relative to handling assembly members' issues.
Thanks.
Okay, good.
And
thank you.
Barbara, I'm wondering if you might be able to jump in and just talk about sort of from your perspective what Desiree does or doesn't do that was on that list that the senator presented.
Really no rush at all. Okay. Go ahead and finish. Thank you.
Felix, I don't have the list in front of me, but
We can pull it up, Barbara, if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay.
And I
Best,
think,
thank you. There you go.
I think in addition, I think Senator Gray Jackson and I can, and Desiree can let you know that when the assembly budget analyst position was filled, we used the position description from Elvie's position, former position, to put these duties into the new position in the clerk's office. So I would suspect that all of these duties are somehow in Desiree's position. I don't think that the utility budget is in there. I don't, constituent inquiries is not in there. And then I think the dilemmas are that if someone has a question for Desiree about the budget, then Desiree answers that. But one person with all of her other duties, she does not have the ability to analyze and compare budgets, prepare the findings and the conclusions, all of those things. She can do that if someone asks questions, but she doesn't do that, on her own initiative. I see the other one prepare working papers just to purport code changes. She does not do that either. But like attend work session, budget advisory commission meetings, she does all of that. So it's kind of a mishmash is what I would say.
Mr. Chairman?
Yeah,
Chair-
Senator.
Yeah, I have a couple more comments. Okay, that office was a 3-person office. We had an admin person, as I mentioned earlier, and the director, I was the director, and then we had a utility budget analyst. And one of the things that our office did too, that I think is very important for the assembly to be able to do their job better is you have a very large agenda for every meeting. Our office used to go through that agenda and review documents, and if there were issues that we needed to bring to your attention, we do a position paper on all of those agenda items that needed to be brought to your attention. In addition, we used to, when there were appropriation resolutions with fund certifications, we used to make sure that the fund certifications were correct, and many times they weren't. And to have staff to be able to do that, because you guys are busy, but to have staff to be able to look at your agenda on a weekly basis and give you a point paper on issues that need to be brought to your attention before the meeting, I think is very important and critical. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And sorry, Desiree, I didn't notice that you were in our participants list before I went to Barbara. Did you want to add anything?
I think I'm going to echo what Barbara said. I try my best to do a lot of the things that are outlined here, but I don't do the super in-depth position papers like Senator Gray Jackson mentioned. But it is a bit of a mishmash on top of other duties for the clerk's office that I do.
Great, thanks. All right, I'm going to go back in the queue. Suzanne.
Thanks, Felix. Thank you, Senator Gray Jackson, for being here and for the presentation. This is really helpful to hear about the history. In fact, at the start of this meeting, I was thinking there actually was an office that had been called Legislative Services, but it sounds like that's not the case. Is that correct, that it was the Assembly Budget Office, which actually included, I mean, from this list here, you know, some constituent support as well? Is that correct? There was never a Legislative Services Office, that it was all handled through Assembly Budget Office, and anything else was the clerk's office?
No, that isn't correct. Thank you. Nice to, I can't see any of you. Come on now. Anyway, that office handled budgetary issues and legislative issues, and it went through different name changes. First, it was called the Assembly Office, then the Assembly Budget and Legislative Services Office, then Assembly Policy and Budget. But that office did policy, legislation, and budgetary issues. But, you know, we have utilities, and it was really, really important to have a position, a utility budget analyst, who focused only on the utilities. And I know we don't have them in LP anymore, but we still have several other utilities. And that person used to go to all the utility board and commission meetings, and used to do position papers on different issues relative to our utilities. So that office did a lot of different things, not just budgetary things. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you, Senator. And Felix, may I follow up?
Yeah, go ahead.
So in terms then, Senator, of constituent relations and how those were sorted in the past, this office of the Assembly Budget Office included some of that. I mean, given the history and your understanding of the Assembly structure now, where do you think that constituent relations should be supported?
Well, I know that everybody has a legislative aid that you pay a small amount of money to do some things, you know, on a monthly basis. But I think, you know, you have a lot of constituents. You got, you know, each district, I think, has about 60,000 constituents. And that office at that time did constituent relations on behalf of assembly members. Remember, there are 11 of you. So 60 times 11, that's a lot of folks to be representing.
Thank
I
you.
hope I answered your question. Good to see you.
Great, thanks so much. Meg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Senator, for joining us. I'd love to hear your input about how having or bringing back some of the responsibilities of this office could best be leveraged and utilized with Assembly Council, and how we can make sure we are being as efficient as possible to produce, our legislation. We have one-time money starting in July to add to Assembly Council's office. And so I just want to make sure that we are thinking through from a practical perspective how to utilize both of these resources in the most efficient way possible based on your experience.
Okay, well, first off, again, it took forever to get, the Assembly to have their own attorney, but that's another story. But the municipal attorney's office has specific duties, just like the clerk's office does, and mostly that's drafting legislation on behalf of the Assembly and accompanying memorandums. But I really don't think that the Assembly and attorney should be drafting resolutions on behalf of the Assembly. I think that, well, that office focused a lot on resolutions, because you do a lot of resolutions, and I'm glad that you do. But I don't think your attorney should be doing feel-good resolutions, if you will. It's just not a good use of your municipal attorney's time if you had another office that was responsible for doing it. I know the clerk's office does some of those resolutions now, but that's my thought.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Great, thanks. All right, so I am next in the queue. You answered one of my questions already, Senator, which is how many positions this office had. So it looks like 3 positions. Can you tell me what the sort of as a whole, the cost when it was fully staffed?
Fully staffed. Let me give me a moment. Okay. I think the cost to fully staff that office, and this is just a rough estimate because I was trying to think of the number, and if you look at a budget book, at one of the years that when that office was there, if you look in a budget book, you'll see exactly what the cost is. But I think it was like about less than 300,000. But as I mentioned, you can look at a budget from a year when I was there, and you'll see the line item and the cost of that office. That's easy to find.
Yeah, that should be. Thank you, Senator.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion or questions before we move on to the next agenda topic? All right, not seeing anything. Thank you so much, Senator, and your staff for coming and presenting. Looking forward to seeing the presentation and digging into that a little bit further. Much appreciated.
And one last comment, again, thank you for the opportunity, and I'm hopeful that the Assembly will make a decision to do the right thing that will not only benefit you, but relieve some of the responsibility of both the clerk's office and your attorney's office. So thanks again, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. All right, let me just double check before I move on to the next topic. Okay, great, he's here. All right, so next topic that we have is a discussion with our Chief Equity Officer. So at the request of several of the members, we are taking time today to have an initial dialogue as a body with Clifford. I know several members have had one-on-one meetings with Clifford, but this gives us an opportunity to have a forth of some of the expectations or ideas that we may have for Clifford and vice versa. I'd like to start with Clifford, see if he wanted to share about his first week or so on the job, and share just any other thoughts that you had before opening up to the body. So Clifford, if you want to go ahead and share whatever you'd like.
Yeah, so definitely an action-packed first week or two at this point, I think. And basically, I'd say I've definitely noticed some practices that we can get at improving internally, I hope, in a short order. I've met, as the chair said, with, I think, almost everybody, and I think I have something scheduled with everybody, save one assembly member at this point. And I've gotten to hear a little bit of your folks' concerns and hopes, I think, for the position. I've met with I think many of the directors and executives throughout the organization, got to meet with a few project teams who are doing different types of pretty cool work. And yeah, overall, it's just been a lot of meetings. And then I think it's been very cool for me to see how some of the expertise that I bring to the position has given me the opportunity to see some things that I definitely think we should hop on the opportunity to improve right away. So I'll just leave it at that as a brief kind of 2-week catch up.
Great, thanks so much. All right, so at this point, we can open it up to any discussion from the members. Again, I know there were some interest in sort of learning how Clifford might work with the assembly, what that relationship might look like, all of these other questions. So feel free to put yourself in the queue, folks. I'll go ahead and start with John.
All right, thanks. Welcome. So, I was thinking about this at a community council meeting last night. They were said, why do we have this? It's very expensive and so on. And I was thinking about that. And, we have had over the last, my time on the assembly, 5 years, and a few court cases where employees, municipal staff sued because they didn't get a promotion or something like that, and felt that there was some, race issues or whatever involved. And those things are very expensive, even if you win. And in some cases we lost. They're extremely expensive, and you can pay for an awful lot of equity officers with those losses. So I just, so anyway, that occurred. Yeah, there's value here if that's stopped. Not to make everything about money, but in fact, most things are. But is that something you would look at? Is say, look at old cases and say, what came up, why? And some of those were just the process that we use for hiring open the door for, to repeat patterns that, aren't so good. Anyway, maybe you can discuss that a bit. Thanks.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Yes, it's expensive to have to go through those sorts of lawsuits. Yes, it's very expensive when you lose them. And there's a lot of institutions who, when they don't do things well, you can have that issue with not only with your workforce, but also with your procurement. So you can be sued by contractors who feel as though they've been discriminated against, and that is very expensive as well. But the other concern I think that a lot of people don't quite understand is that there are a lot of federal and state requirements related to equity, and non-compliance with those means that you lose all federal funding and federal grants. And so that means your police department, your fire department, all of the sort of grants and things that they have for their infrastructure are also at risk of being lost if you're found to have discriminatory practices throughout your organization. And so it's not something that's necessarily optional to have equity or affirmative action type things. It's quite literally a part of federal and state law to do those sorts of things. And so that is something that, has come to my attention, as you mentioned, the kind of history in the organization of some of these lawsuits, and also kind of how some of the positions, not unlike mine in the organization, although mine is new, there are some that have been here for quite some time that perhaps I don't think have been seen as important as they actually are to deal with the risks that you mentioned and I've just mentioned. So yes, it's definitely my intention to make it very clear to everyone exactly why we need to do the things that we need to do, and then what the risks are associated with not doing them properly. And I hope that's not necessarily the driver of why folks want to do things, but that is also the risk associated with not doing them. That is a very real thing that is ever present in every government organization and private companies over certain sizes.
Thanks.
Thanks. Cameron?
Yeah. Hi, Clifford. How are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Thanks. I'm doing well too. A few things that are on my mind, just want to share, and these are more just brainstorm things. When you and I spoke initially, I asked you about what you needed from us as an assembly. So maybe you could speak a little bit to that in terms of what, initially in the first few months of your work, in the first year of your work, what sort of your thoughts are in terms of how we can support you and what you need from us in order for you to do your job well. The second thing that's on my mind that I wanted to just throw out to the conversation here is how you are going to engage with this body as it relates to committees. Oftentimes, we have a whole slew of committees, and senior leadership within the municipality are often linked to a particular committee or two, and that's one way for us to do work in that area. And I'm curious your thoughts about that. You may not know, but I'm also curious just with others in terms of what they think, how they think best you should interact with us related to committees. So those are the two things: what you need from us, and just thoughts about how to connect with us through committees.
Yeah, so on the work side, I think, the initial stuff, which, I've tried to already start, is just getting to know your folks' interests and your community's interests in terms of the work that I'm going to be doing. And then there's definitely going to be a point where working on some initial data indicators and such that we'll want to build some infrastructure around to capture. So I was recently looking at the kind of welcoming Anchorage thing as a proxy for an equity index. If we built more measurable goals that you as an assembly would be interested in having around those sorts of things that we can then track over time. But definitely getting your input for what your specific goals are, and then how we can measure those over time. Those are some short-term things. I think longer-term things that haven't necessarily come to pass or aren't necessary yet would be definitely when it comes to the point that perhaps we need to add some additional processes that may be related to an ordinance or something. If we find that to be a barrier, again, just to use what Assemblymember Weddleton mentioned with like hiring or something, then it'd be needing your support on those particular issues. And so obviously I would take it as my job to make sure that you're as educated on that topic as possible. And then we'd probably need your support in terms of a vote at some point on something like that. And then the second question related to reporting structure, I'm also interested in that conversation. I think right now it's kind of been proposed that I join. I think that's why we joined this particular meeting at the moment. And I think the kind of two ideas that I understand are being floated is basically one is basically being auxiliary to other things that exist and providing perhaps an equity analysis to things that are already out there. And then the other option being having a specific committee. In terms of which one I personally favor, probably starting with the latter, in that if you had something that was specifically just equity, it's such a large issue that I don't know that you could be super specific and that you can really attack a single issue in a meaningful amount of time in something like that. So I think having subject specific things where I can add something to a meeting that already exists might be a better way to start. And then if we feel like we needed something in addition later, I would definitely be open to it. So I think maybe that gets at your question. But then I guess I would also just add that, since I am reporting to the assembly as a part of my position, just that assembly members, feel comfortable enough to reach out to me with any specific issues or questions that they have as they come out throughout, just throughout the week.
Great. Thanks, Clifford. And just Felix, just one quick addition, if it's okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
In my mind, I'm thinking, I know this may be difficult initially, but for you to maybe think about an initial plan of some kind, whether it's your first 90 days, your first six months, something that you could actually get to us that would articulate what a few of your priorities are going to be. I think that would really help us to communicate to our constituents, what you're going to be working on and what that's going to look like initially. And that can be broad, but if we can all be on the same page and be using the same language as it relates to, your work and your priorities and how we're engaging with you on that, I think that would be helpful. So something for you to consider. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
Thanks. Meg?
Thanks, Felix. Hi, Clifford. Thanks to Cameron for that last comment. It actually is right. Actually, I'm going to juxtapose it with, how do you foresee or want to handle some things that were already in the pipeline before you came on board that could probably we could utilize your skills in ensuring that we have an equity discussion? There's a few things actually came up yesterday in community and economic development about rolled curbs of all things, but there's how we build our neighborhoods. Obviously there's an equity piece to that, but also we have shelter licensing. We have a Title 21 issue around shelter coming soon. So there are some things in the works. And so we wouldn't want to overwhelm you, because I know you're trying to put some foundational pieces in place, but what are your ideas or thoughts about how we start to get you up to speed on some of the things that we may have already been working at that are probably headed kind of more toward the dais in the near term?
Yeah, I definitely would be interested in being involved in such discussions. And I think maybe just as something that you'd probably see in any work plan sort of scenario that I would develop, another thing that I'm starting to do now is developing basically an equity portfolio for the organization, talking about what are the kind of things that we're required to do by federal law, by state law, or even by municipal code, and where we are on those specific things. So like when you mention curb compliance and that sort of thing, and things where we actually should have people who are specifically accountable for that thing. And for that, I actually know that we do, but making sure that we have the specific point people for any given equity related issue who have a kind of pointed to and named responsibility, and then also not just that they have it, but that we give them organizationally everything that they need to be included in the conversation, irrespective of where they may be in the organization, to make sure that we're staying compliant on those issues. So I would definitely be interested, especially initially, in being involved so that I can start to index some of those things that I might not otherwise be made aware of as things that we don't have, or are things that if you're asking about it, that means that even if we have it, perhaps it's not being communicated well enough, and that's also a thing to take note of. So that's what I would say about that. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks. Can I just make a quick comment, Chair?
Sure.
Thanks. I appreciate that you want to bring us into compliance if we're not in compliance. I also want us to just keep an eye toward, being in compliance with state, federal, local laws, always very important. But that we can a lot of times do better than compliance. We can do best practice or good practice. So I want us to not just make sure we're checking a box, but that we're digging into this work, at least from my perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, I strongly agree. And on almost all issues of compliance as it relates to federal or state mandates, I would view them as the baseline or the minimum that we should be doing as a community. And almost irrespective of type of protected class or issue, best practice is not what the federal requirements are or the state requirements. It's always much further along than that. But obviously, again, just starting, I want to make sure that we're at least covering our bases. And then once we have that basis covered, if there isn't already something else built out that's better, we then start to work on that.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, thanks. I want to roll back up to what Cameron said in the context of, where does this fit in kind of a establishing order of how we're going to relate to each other and do the work. And as I think about the structures that we have, until such time that there's a more thoughtful structure established, I think that the chair hit on the best model right here, which is the Rules Committee. We have established our own work program. I don't know if you've seen that document, kind of our assembly priorities. And Felix and I talk about this. I bring it up every time, and he says, yes, we're talking about that. We're going to get there soon. Is to add a plank that's called equity to the Assembly's priorities so that it's a filter or framework for everything we're looking at. So, Felix, I might recommend you nailed it with bringing it to this committee, and we might build it into this committee regularly until such a time as we have identified a specific and kind of focused committee structure where this would happen separate from a committee of the whole. So I just see this as the best place at this time.
Thanks, Chris. And I did mention the priorities to Clifford, but I'll make sure to send a copy of it to him so he can take a look at it at his leisure.
Yeah, and the idea there, Clifford, is we are really, we hired you, we created the position, we're talking about it at every meeting, but it doesn't exist in our plan, which is kind of hilarious. It's like, it probably should be stated clearly. So.
Thanks. Any other discussion, questions, thoughts, comments? All right, so it sounds like we will continue using this particular committee to have these discussions on a regular basis. I would always encourage members, if there's a specific thing, to reach out to Clifford if you have something that's specific and timely. But otherwise, we'll look at continuing to develop the structure as this position evolves further. Clifford, did you have any final thoughts before we move on?
No, I think that's probably it. And I think, when we meet again, perhaps I will have kind of what Assemblymember Perez said about a work plan, because there are definitely some items that I could go into discussion about, but it'd probably be best to leave that to after you've already seen it and could maybe be a little bit briefed on it, and then we can have a more thorough discussion around nice items like that.
Great. All right. Thanks so much for joining us today, Clifford. All right, so then I'm going to go ahead and take us to our third topic on the agenda, which I added at the very beginning. So that is the upcoming Alaska Black Caucus community conversation with the Assembly. So just to do a full recap, in January, we started a bi-monthly community conversation with the Alaska Black Caucus. They're typically the fourth or the last Sunday of the month. I believe everyone should have saved the dates in your calendar for this next one, which is going to be on May 24th. And basically what we're doing is the first one in January was a sort of an introduction one. And then from there, we're going back and forth between the Alaska Black Caucus and then the Assembly to choose a topic. So in March, members may remember that the topic there was chosen by the Alaska Black Caucus, and now it's May time. It's our opportunity to choose a topic. And so I wanted to open up, see if the members had a specific topic they'd like to entertain for our May 24th community conversation. Go ahead, Meg.
Thanks. Is it the 24th, Monday, or is it supposed to be on the 23rd? Just a clarifying question first, and then I do have an idea I will share as well.
Yeah, sorry, it's the 23rd.
Okay,
so
great.
Everyone should have saved the date 7 p.m. on the 23rd in your calendar.
I do. IT has not figured out my calendar yet, so I'm just making sure I'm got the correct spot. So one topic of conversation could be COVID recovery from this perspective of the Alaska Black Caucus, issues that we should be made aware of. I met with the Alaska Black Chamber of Commerce and got had some good conversation. And I think we saw some ARPA proposals come in after that. But, I think it goes beyond funding. We should have a deeper conversation about the effects of COVID on the BIPOC community, and what, I think it stressed a lot of known inequities, and how we can be more mindful as we move forward in this recovery phase. Thanks.
Thanks. Good idea. Chris?
Yeah, thank you. We have had some very interesting conversations and policy shifts around our boards and commissions. And I would love us to drive a conversation with the members of the caucus on opportunities and challenges to serving on our boards and commissions and how we can increase participation.
Thanks. That's a good one. I'm sure John would love that one. Any other thoughts?
John is happy with that one. Thanks, Chris.
Any other thoughts or ideas? And what I will do is I will keep a tally of these, and it may be that this month we cover one of these, and then a couple of months from now we'll cover another one. All right. Not hearing any other thoughts. Feel free to email me.
Actually, one more, Felix. Yeah. And it might, I don't know how to structure this one, but there's the nexus between the assembly and the school board and these issues, and issues of equity, issues of the Black Caucus and their interests. And so at some point it might be very interesting to do a similar work project, but jointly between the school board, the assembly, and the caucus.
Sure, thanks. All right, I'll put up one more time. If you don't have fully fleshed out ideas now, you can feel free to email, call, or text me with additional ideas, and I'll make sure they get added to the list. All right, not seeing anything else, then we'll go ahead and move on. So I think that completes all of our normal business. So let's move on to audience participation. I believe we have a couple of folks on the line. So if you'd like to participate, please unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello?
Go ahead, Mr. Haberman.
Okay, I'll set my timer. My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I follow the public process. When a public process is done appropriately, a decision made by the governing body is more likely public interest. Yes, I live in the Valley right now, but 20 of those years as an Alaska resident, I lived in Anchorage, and I follow your meetings closely. It's important to note that when you have meetings, you need to do a public notice of those meetings. Your meeting that you had prior to this meeting, the work session dealing with temporary suspension of procurement rules, there was no notice on the website where the notices would be. And for any assembly member to question that it's not true, I take pictures with my iPhone to document that and to show that there was no notice there. How I heard about it was the clerk's office sends me an email of what's ahead. And it was noted that item, which dealt with temporary suspension of procurement rules, was going to be held as was. But the fact is, you can have meetings without a proper notice, and that's what happened. Also, inability, that was a very important discussion that you had, but the public had no chance to be connected in to visually see the meeting and what was presented and the amendments that you were having. Now, the Rules Committee thing that you are having right now, respectfully, there was a notice, yes, but the only option available was audio only. And the result was there was a presentation by the state senator at this meeting, and the public was blinded to what that presentation was, and it wasn't even available on the website. So, you're dealing with issues, and the one on the procurement rule suspension, you've got it at the assembly meeting next Wednesday as finishing business, but there won't be a chance for public to speak. And how do you expect public to be engaged when you operate that way? With all due respect, I appreciate you taking this as constructive criticism, and I'm only trying to make it so it's fair for everyone, that people respect you and from the public, and vice versa. And I'll leave with that, except I don't have much time, so I'll just leave with that. And I look forward to seeing you all at the meeting Wednesday night. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I believe that's all of the members of the public that we have today. With that, I will go ahead and adjourn this meeting and wish everyone a great weekend. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Bye, thanks.
Bye.